On the show, myself, Daniel, Paul, we talk about the legalization of cannabis, and we're on board for its legalization across the country. But now there's also talk in Colorado. Again, it seems to be the birthplace of legalization. They already did a successful job in legalizing cannabis. Now the state of Colorado is talking about the legalization of mushrooms.
Magic mushrooms. It's primarily Denver voters right now.
Okay, Denver.
And Denver was actually apparently the first city who actually legalized things in terms of cannabis. They also wanted to legalize a safe injection site for intravenous drug users. That was scrapped because of federal issues.
Right.
But they're looking very seriously now at magic mushrooms. And the nifty thing about this, I think that Denver is a hardcore libertarian state. I mean, I think or city, I should say. But there's a very, the West is kind of libertarian to begin with, Denver in particular. So if you've been following the news in recent years, there has been a renaissance in the idea of using psychedelics as medication for mental health issues. We forget, that back in the 60s, things like LSD and whatnot were being tested for a variety of purposes.
Absolutely.
As a treatment for alcoholism. Now, a lot of people don't know this, but Bill Wilson, Bill W., one of the founders of Alcoholics Anonymous, was very interested in this research because he never saw AA as a treatment program. It was a fellowship, a supportive fellowship, but he was very interested in treatments, and LSD was being tested for all this. Suddenly, everything got Schedule 1. I don't understand in the case of magic mushrooms.
Good old Nixon.
Well, yeah, I know, but the idea of making a plant an illegal substance makes no sense to me whatsoever. It never has. But in any case, so they're looking at decriminalizing magic mushrooms. Now, I want to point out there's a difference between legalization and decriminalization, and basically the ordinance would say we're not going to put any of our resources into arresting people for this.
Okay.
But there has been recently a move among therapists to use magic mushrooms for a variety of conditions, including anxiety and very standard depression, anxiety, that sort of thing. Now, some people are a little bit concerned about the misuse of the drug for these conditions. Some psychiatrists have said, look, we think it's a good idea to test these things, but in inexperienced hands, it could actually make matters worse. And of course, there's the usual hue and cry from conservatives who are afraid that Denver is going to become a destination for drug tourists.
I remember the same talk when they were in Denver and in Colorado as a whole, where they want to make cannabis legalized. And they were saying that it's going to become a drug state, that the criminals are going to run rampant, that there's going to be chaos everywhere, that law enforcement's going to be overwhelmed.
Cats and dogs living together.
Yeah, I know, but the thing is, Lainey, here's the situation, is that didn't happen, everyone. No. And guess what happened? Colorado got a budgetary surplus. I mean, I've talked this over on the show again, and anyone who's watching from Colorado, especially on our show right now, last I've heard some very interesting stories about your budget revenue where the state government is actually giving you guys refund checks back. We here in Illinois, well, we never heard of a budgetary surplus or idea of the state government giving us a nice refund check, but saying, hey, we're making so much money, here's a refund because cannabis is paying for everything. Cannabis is paying for our schools, our roads, our police departments, key components of our infrastructure. And now it's finally being shown that this war on drugs, similar to the war on prohibition, similar to prohibition in the 1930s, is a joke. If we look at prohibition, it created the crime syndicate. It created Al Capone. It created all the problems. And not to mention the people that were supposed to enforce the laws became corrupt themselves. Very similar to the war on drugs. I think we need to start having an open, very similar to prohibition. Well, I kind of started there for a minute there, but folks, you get the picture. It's just like the war on drugs has only led to mass incarceration. It's made the problem worse. It's made people, especially it's impacted African American and Latino communities the most, and it's disenfranchised numerous people. And now finally there's talk about legalizing cannabis, and finally a conversation about the legalization of, at least, or the decriminalization of magic mushrooms in the city of Denver, which is in Colorado, which is fantastic. fantastic. And if it could be monitored, regulated, and at also same time too ensure that the people won't be harassed by federal laws, I say go for it. It's time we have a conversation. I wish something like this was happening in Chicago so we can actually have a much more further kind of research and analysis into the impact of magic mushrooms, especially into research like in regards to PTSD or people suffering from mental illness. We need to have this conversation and debate, and we need to start looking at the benefits, because there's been a lot of research in cannabis on how it can actually help people recover from much more abusive drugs such as methamphetamine or cocaine or any kind of dangerous drug material, where people are actually using cannabis to get off their addiction. I mean, we need to have this conversation. But Lainey, you were talking more about the story before we even started.
Yeah, one thing I would also point out is there is quite a little industry in selling tours to various places in Central and Latin America for psychedelic therapy under the supervision of traditional medicine experts. And some of these tours seem to work for people. For others, there have been some very serious problems. What could it possibly be like if people could perhaps pursue psychedelic therapy in the U.S. In a place where they're more comfortable, it's less expensive to get there. I think that there's that issue. There's also the issue that this would potentially decriminalization and hopefully just stop scheduling this sort of thing. If you deschedule this stuff, allowing mental health practitioners to do their jobs and do some quality research rather than just guessing.
And it's very interesting, too. In the chat, too, we actually have someone named Ben Tahoe, OG. He said magic mushrooms was proposed in the Oregon Senate, too. So that's fascinating, because it's more than one other place in the United States where they're actually having this debate and conversation. I think we need to look at much more larger scope, and that is how much longer do we have to still continue to basically allow these products like cannabis or magic mushrooms to still be illegal? Because if we look at the rest of the international community, they're moving on with the legalization of these materials. They're looking to ensure that they're regulated and that they follow rules and protections so that consumers aren't hurt by them. And I think in the United States, we need to have that conversation too. And it's a much needed source of revenue and scientific research. Lainey?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with what you've said. I would also just point out, we were talking about prohibition earlier. Mm-hmm. Alcohol is our drug of choice. It's a respectable drug of choice in the U.S. It has documented problems. I mean, there's all kinds of things that alcohol does to people that is very, very bad, and yet we have no problem with it. And we have drugs here that, of course, can have bad side effects. I'm not saying that they don't, but that may also have the potential for helping people with concerns, as well as providing, hey, a nice buzz or a nice experience.
I think so too, because because when you look at the history of prohibition, especially when the government started banning alcohol, what did people do? Did they say, okay, we're done drinking, no more alcohol, that's it, it's over? No, that didn't happen at all. People went to get alcohol, and they got it from sometimes it would cause death and blindness or permanent damage otherwise, because people still wanted to get a drink. And same thing with the war on drugs too. You can't stop people from wanting to enact some of their behaviors, okay? But if we can make a product that's safe and regulated and protected, I say we go for it. And this could be, again, a huge economic boon for the city of Denver. Is there any other kind of final point you want to put onto this story, Lainey?
Isn't that how we got Malort? Was for prohibition? that it was supposed to be for medicinal purposes, and that's...
Okay, just so you guys know, Malort is a Chicago drink, Illinois drink. It's okay. I had it for the first time for my birthday just last February, and it's not good. No. But there's a lot of hype saying that it was I was not as disgusted as I was preparing myself for, but it's a drink that you don't want, okay? And I think we all want a nice drink, and I think we all want nice, safe magic mushrooms and nice, safe cannabis too.
And a nice, comfy bed, and for nice, comfy naps. And if you ever do come to Chicago and somebody in a bar offers you a Chicago shot, you're getting Malort, and now you know what's happening to you.